If you sit in an empty room for 5 minutes without your phone, music, or any external stimulation, you will quickly notice that your mind is not at peace. Within moments, your attention is hijacked by a torrent of uninvited thoughts, sudden spikes of anxiety, and compulsive urges to check a screen or to change your posture. Even when your physical body is completely stationary, an intense internal conflict takes place inside your mind. This reveals a fundamental human crisis. Unfortunately, we have lost the ability to simply exist in our own skin without constant manufactured distractions. Many of us assume we are fully in control of our thoughts and actions, yet much of our daily life is driven by automatic biological loops, emotional reactions, and deeply conditioned unconscious patterns. We operate under the delusion of free will while actually living in automatic servitude to our habits and neurology. As a result, our attention becomes chronically fragmented, our focus weakens, and our inner world feels increasingly chaotic. The environment that we live in nowadays is explicitly designed to capture and monetize our attention, making it incredibly difficult to remain intentional and self-governing. Modern neuroscience helps explain why this internal struggle exists. Researchers have identified a collection of brain regions known together as the default mode network, or the DMN for short. This network becomes active when we are not focused on a specific task. When our attention is not directed outward, the mind naturally turns inward. During these moments, we think about ourselves, we replay memories, imagine future possibilities, evaluate our relationships, and we reflect on our experiences. This process is not inherently negative. In fact, it plays an important role in learning, planning, and self-reflection. The problem arises when these mental processes become excessive. Instead of helping us reflect, when they become excessive, they start to trap us in cycles of overthinking. We replay past mistakes repeatedly, imagine worst-case scenarios, become consumed by worries about the future, or we fixate on how others perceive us. Rather than experiencing the present moment, we become absorbed in a constant stream of internal commentary. More than 1,000 years ago, Islamic scholars described a similar phenomenon using different language. They spoke about the nafs al-ammara, which is often translated as the commanding self. This refers to the aspect of human nature that seeks immediate gratification and is driven primarily by impulses, desires, emotions, and instincts. When a person continually follows these impulses without reflection, they begin to live reactively rather than intentionally. Their actions become determined by whichever emotion, desire, or distraction is strongest at the moment. Although neuroscience and Islamic psychology use different terminology, both point toward a similar reality. Human beings nowadays often function on autopilot. We tend to become trapped in habits, emotional reactions, and mental patterns that operate without conscious awareness or deliberate examination. When people experience anxiety, depression, addiction, distraction, or a lack of meaning, they naturally seek explanations. In modern society, one of the most common explanations comes from a strictly materialistic view of human nature. According to this perspective, human beings are ultimately biological organisms whose thoughts, emotions, and behaviors can be fully explained through physical processes. Brain activity, hormones, genetics, and neurochemistry are treated as the primary causes of human experience. There is considerable truth in this approach. The brain and the nervous system both matter. Sleep, nutrition, hormones, and neurological function all have profound effects on how we think, feel, and behave. However, problems arise when these biological explanations are treated as a complete explanation of what it means to be human. A person may understand the chemistry of love without understanding its meaning. They may understand the neurological mechanisms involved in moral decision-making without understanding why morality matters. They may even describe religious experiences in terms of neural activity while still remaining unable to explain their significance. The reductionist model is often very effective at explaining how certain processes occur. It is far less effective at explaining why those processes matter or what purpose they ultimately serve. On the opposite end of the spectrum is a hyper-abstract, disembodied spirituality. This paradigm often treats the physical body as an illusion or a spiritual prison that must be ignored, suppressed, or bypassed entirely. In some expressions of this perspective, faith, purification, self-discipline, and spiritual growth are emphasized while the biological realities that influence daily life are overlooked. It assumes that if a person simply believes strongly enough or worships sincerely enough, psychological and physiological struggles will naturally disappear. In practice, things are rarely that simple. A person may sincerely desire concentration in prayer while struggling with chronic sleep deprivation. Someone may long for emotional stability while living in a constant state of stress and nervous system dysregulation. Another person may genuinely seek spiritual growth while carrying years of unhealthy habits that may have become deeply ingrained. When biology is ignored, spiritual development can become overly theoretical. A person may understand important spiritual principles, yet struggle to apply them consistently in everyday life because the physical foundations that support those principles have not been addressed. Both extreme paradigms offer part of the picture, yet neither of them offers the full picture. If neither a purely materialistic approach nor a purely spiritual approach provides a complete understanding of human nature, then what is missing? What is missing is the recognition that human beings are both biological and spiritual. We're not simply brains, hormones, and nervous systems. At the same time, we're not souls existing independently of our physical bodies. Every moment of human experience involves these two dimensions interacting with one another. Consider something as simple as anger. From a biological perspective, anger involves changes in brain activity, hormone levels, heart rate, breathing patterns, and nervous system activation. From a spiritual perspective, anger can also become a moral and ethical challenge that tests patience, self-control, humility, and character. Neither explanation is wrong. In fact, each describes a different aspect of the same event. The same principle applies to anxiety, temptation, gratitude, compassion, discipline, worship, etc. Every action we perform involves biological processes occurring within the body while also carrying psychological, moral, and spiritual significance. For this reason, true self-development cannot focus exclusively on either biology or spirituality. Both must be understood together. The Quran itself points to the importance of inner transformation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Indeed, Allah will not change the condition of a people until they change what is within themselves." This verse reminds us that meaningful change begins within the individual. While ultimate success comes from Allah Azza wa Jal, human beings are called to actively cultivate and reform their inner selves. When Islamic scholars spoke about purifying the self through tazkiyatun nafs, they were not describing a purely abstract process. They were describing the gradual transformation of habits, desires, thoughts, and behaviors. Today, neuroscience demonstrates that repeated behaviors physically change the body through neuroplasticity. In simple terms, the choices we make repeatedly strengthen the neural pathways associated with those choices over time. This does not mean that spirituality can be reduced to neuroscience. Rather, it means that spiritual growth often produces measurable effects in both the brain and the body. The physical and spiritual dimensions of human life constantly influence one another. Understanding this relationship gives us a more complete framework for understanding how genuine transformation occurs. Many people assume that combining psychology, neuroscience, and spirituality is a modern idea. In reality, Muslim scholars have been exploring the relationship between the body, mind, and soul for centuries. One important example is Abu Zayd al-Balkhi rahimahullah, a 9th century scholar who wrote extensively about mental and emotional health. He recognized that physical illness can affect emotional well-being and that psychological distress can influence physical health. Long before modern psychology emerged as a formal discipline, he understood that the body and mind constantly influence one another. Other scholars continued exploring these relationships in different ways. Imam Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah wrote extensively about the diseases of the heart, the influence of desires, and the ways repeated actions shape character. He observed that unhealthy behaviors are not isolated events. Instead, they gradually influence how a person thinks, perceives, and responds to the world. This idea should sound familiar to modern readers. Contemporary neuroscience demonstrates that repeated thoughts and behaviors strengthen the neural pathways associated with those patterns, while pathways that are activated less frequently may gradually weaken. This process, known as neuroplasticity, helps explain why habits become increasingly automatic through repeated practice. Although the language differs, there is a clear overlap between these observations and the insights found in Islamic literature. Both recognize that human beings are shaped by what they repeatedly think, feel, and do. The purpose of this series is not to force ancient scholarship into modern science or to reduce spiritual concepts to brain activity. Rather, the goal is to place these two perspectives in conversation with one another so that we can better understand the human being as a whole. At the center of this series is the concept of neuro-spiritual sovereignty. The word sovereignty usually refers to self-rule or independence. In this framework, however, sovereignty means something more specific. It refers to the ability to consciously govern oneself, rather than being controlled by impulses, habits, distractions, or emotional reactions. Most people have experienced moments when they have acted against their better judgment. They may have lost their temper despite knowing they should remain calm. They might have wasted hours on distractions despite wanting to be productive. Or they may have continued a harmful habit despite knowing its consequences. In those moments, knowledge alone was not enough. The challenge was not a lack of information, it was a lack of self-regulation. Neuro-spiritual sovereignty is the process of developing that self-regulation. It means learning how to recognize impulses without automatically obeying them. It means learning how to regulate emotions instead of being overwhelmed by them. And it means directing attention intentionally instead of allowing it to be controlled by every notification, desire, or distraction that appears. From an Islamic perspective, this process is not about becoming completely autonomous or independent from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rather, it is about freeing oneself from the countless forms of false mastery that compete for control over human behavior. A person who is controlled by anger is not truly free. A person who is controlled by addiction is not truly free. And a person who is controlled by endless distractions is not truly free. True freedom emerges when the intellect, character, and spiritual purpose of a person become strong enough to guide their actions consistently. Developing this kind of self-governance requires understanding how the human being actually functions. For this reason, this series will explore the human person from multiple perspectives. We will examine the body, the nervous system, the brain, emotions, habits, attention, identity, and conscious decision-making. We will also explore the concepts of ruh, qalb, aql, nafs, and qareen within the broader framework of Islamic anthropology. Rather than treating these topics as isolated subjects, we will examine how they interact with one another. How do habits influence character? How do emotions influence decision making? How does attention shape perception? And how do repeated behaviors affect both the brain and the heart? And how does spiritual practice influence our everyday life? These are the kind of questions we will explore throughout the series. The goal is not simply to learn information. It is to develop a practical understanding of ourselves so that knowledge can be translated into action. By understanding the different dimensions of the human being and how they interact, we can begin moving from automatic behavior towards intentional living that is according to the submission of Allah. Understanding these foundations is essential because every higher aspect of human functioning emerges through them. Before we can understand the heart, we must first understand the vessel that carries it. Before we can understand behavior, we must first understand the systems that support it. And before we can understand transformation, we must first understand the structure that is being transformed. Insha'Allah, in the next video, we will begin exploring the architecture of the human organism itself.